Hugh Hamilton Wines is where we are, and we farm 3 beautiful pieces of viticultural land down here. They're all so different, which is one of the things that just makes it delightful to be a farmer here in McLaren Vale. I am a 6th generation wine grower and rebellious black sheep of McLaren Vale. It was started by my great-great-great-grandfather, so I'm 187 years into grape growing, and I guess you could say that wine is in my blood, although it more often than not ends up in my glass as well. We've always just had this way of not marching to the beat of other people's drums. We do things a little bit differently. There's a rebellious spirit in our family DNA. I'm a proud black sheep that won't be pinned down by convention. The wine ethos here at Hugh Hamilton Wines is, if I distilled it down into one sentence, it's heritage with attitude. And I say that because we honour our past, which is long and deep, but we don't live it, if that makes sense. We're fueled by 6 generations of winemaking and grape growing, but we don't play it safe. Whether it be from our regenerative farming on our vineyards through to really quizzical blends we make. I love our history. I'm very inspired by it, but I will not be constrained by nearly 200 years of the past. The wines we craft here, I would say, are very much around their personality and story. For me, that brings wine to life. So it's not so much ranges of reds or whites, it's more moods and characters. They're bold in their personality. Whether it be a really fresh, crispy white like our Trickster Pinot Gris, through to something luscious and bold like our members only Ancient Earth Shiraz, or something kind of wild and unusual like this guy here, our Saperavi. We do make a lot of different wines and they all have their own personality. What I want people to feel when they're drinking a Hugh Hamilton wine is that I am not here to quench your thirst. You can go and do that with a can of Coca-Cola. I'm here to take you on a discovery, a journey, a story. So I really want to take you to a sense of place here in McLaren Vale. I want you to taste what this region really is like, and that's done through making wines that come off vineyards where you're standing. So to make wines that are not of conformity, that break some rules, we do plenty of that, whether it be through exotic blends or planting varietals that don't match the script. I want people to have a sense that it's bloody good quality, but that was a left turn that I didn't see coming. My favourite grape variety, that is like asking me which of my children is my favourite child, and I have 2 children and it would be very unpopular if I nominated one. I'm not going to take that question home, but today I'm going to tell you about one of my very favourite varieties, and that is Saperavi. My winemaker, when he first joined us, came here because he wanted to be able to make Saperavi, and he says that it is like Shiraz on a diet of lightning. And I just think that that tells you so much about why this is such an amazing wine. It's got an 8,000-year-old history. I mean, if you can bend your mind back 8,000 years, that's pre-pyramids, pre the wheel, pre-bronze. It's when woolly mammoths are still roaming the earth. To think that they were drinking this wine, which has exactly the same DNA here in McLaren Vale as it did in Georgia 8,000 years ago, is quite remarkable, and it shows how wine is a connector. So how could I not be in love with a wine that has this incredible story? And when I see it planted down here in our vineyard, I know that it is something that is different to everything else. because it does not behave like a modern variety. It will not be domesticated. It's kind of like having a wolf in your house when it's meant to be a dog. It wants to stay wild, you know, where most vines would sort of sit out here on a trellis and get fat and happy. Saperavi stays reed thin, and it's because it's wily and it's looking out of the corner of its eye as though it wants to take off and crawl up a tree to find the sunlight in a forest. I love that it's not going to be pinned down. It sort of really suits us as being a black sheep variety. And then what about it in the glass? Well, there's still so much to fall in love with. You know, it's got this very dark colour, and that's because it's one of the only Teinturier varieties in the world where the skin is super black, but the flesh is also red, unlike most wine varieties of red colour where the flesh is white. There is so much natural tannin in that skin that it lives forever. So if you want a wine for, you know, a celebration in 50 years' time, this is the guy. Yet it's got natural acidity that keeps it bright and fresh, and the spice, it's just so different. I mean, it's like cardamom pods and fenugreek, it's cinnamon, it's really interesting. So here's to Saperavi, born on lightning. The best wine is enjoyed when you don't have a lot of distraction. So I always think it's a bit of an error that you bust out your best stuff at a dinner party where there's 20 people around and the clatter of knives and forks and music and chatter and distraction. My favourite pairing is a winter's afternoon, about 2 o'clock, fire going. You pull out one of your best bottles, something aged, put it into a decanter, go through the pageantry and the theatre and the ritual, pour it out, sit by the fire, having gone to the Central Market that morning or on Saturday morning, bought 2 or 3 really good cheeses, and then just sit there, and over the course of 3 hours, you enjoy the journey of your best bottle. No distraction. Maybe you allow, I don't know, your partner or your dog to be there, but that is when you really get to enjoy the perfect pairing of a beautiful bottle of wine when you can bring your whole self to it. My dad always said to me, "You're only as good as your last vintage." And he told me that very early on. And I think he meant by that don't rest on your laurels. Don't think that because there's a history that you can coast into the future on the coattails of the past. And it's funny because as humans, we have this negative bias, I think. It's hard not to remember the trying vintages, but on the whole, how lucky are we? Because McLaren Vale is actually, I think, probably one of the most reliable places to make wine on planet Earth, in that we actually don't have really bad wipeout vintages. And that's thanks to this incredible geography behind me where we're flanked by ocean and hills. And it just means that reliably we get beautiful sunshine. We don't get frost or humidity, we ripen our fruit, we have gorgeous ancient soil here, and sometimes we'd like a little bit more water, and I wouldn't mind turning down the sunshine a little bit sometimes, but on the whole, every vintage is actually pretty spectacular. What makes McLaren Vale unique? You know, I have to travel around the world and talk about this a lot, and I am always trying to paint a picture for people who are tens of thousands of miles away to help them understand what this place is like. And I hope I'm painting a picture of a tapestry of terroir, because that's how I see it. I don't see it as one homogeneous region. I see it as an artist's palette, if you like, of different colours, and that we can paint pictures of flavour and wine through all these different colours. It is this wonderful tapestry of different soil types and microclimates. That's one way that I see McLaren Vale. The geography of the sea and the vines is indisputable, and it brings a freshness, I reckon, to this place. It feels vital, and I like that has brought with it a feeling of being young between the ears. My dad is now in his 80s, and at his 80th birthday, he said a line that I think was pretty memorable, which was, "Don't let the old man in." And I think McLaren Vale captures that spirit really well. We do not make old man wines. We make wines that are young and fresh and vibrant and daring. And I think that that is what makes McLaren Vale unique. A McLaren Vale vintner who has inspired me was actually my grandfather, Bert Hamilton, who was an incredibly understated man and who is not famous for being anything that was spectacular necessarily in his own right. But what inspired me was two things. Firstly, every single day he got up, he got into his suit, his lovely buttoned up shirt and his tie, and he put his hat on to leave home so that my grandmother would see him looking like a gentleman, and he would come to McLaren Vale to the winery and he would get into his overalls, and even into his 80s he was jumping around in tanks and barrels cleaning them, and at the end of the day he would put back on the tie and the hat so that when he got home my grandmother would see him looking like a charming man. That work ethic really inspired me, but he was also really great at growing things, and it's the reason we came to McLaren Vale, because our original family business started up in the centre of Adelaide, Hamilton's Ewell, and my grandfather could see the suburban sprawl was going to push all that farmland up near the city out to become houses, which it has. And so he brought us down here, and he was really great at growing things. And I think we're a little too seduced by celebrity and things that have lots of colour and movement these days, and there's something to be said for the quiet achiever who just got up every single day and did it over and over and did things really well. That inspires me. Here at Hugh Hamilton Wines, we're lucky enough to have 3 separate vineyards. Think of it like an iceberg. You know, an iceberg appears to have all the action on the top, but really all the action's happening under the sea. And it's like that with vines. Yes, you can see the grapes on the top, and that's obviously what we use to make wine, but it's actually the soil underneath and the rocks under the soil that are where the flavours come from. And so I find it fascinating and fortunate that with 3 different soils and 3 different patent rocks that sit underneath, that we can dial up the different characteristics that we want to see in the wine. At our cellar block, we're mainly on a big chunky Bay of Biscay clay, and it's a real water thief clay. If you've ever played with clay, you know that it sort of sucks in the water and it doesn't give it back, and you've got to be a tough vine to survive in that. I call the Shiraz that comes out of this vineyard, you know, like the boxer. You've got to be a heavyweight. Whereas down on our church vineyard, that's an alluvial soil, quite different, and the wines that come from there are much more plush and generous. And then on our 3rd vineyard at Blewett Springs, it's beach sand, and so those roots are going down a long way in making fine, elegant style wines. One of the things I think does not get talked about enough with wine, because people get a bit obsessed with smells and flavours, but texture. Texture to me is probably the most fascinating part of a wine. How does it feel in your mouth? And I liken it to, you know, things that you can relate to. So, you know, something like the feeling of fabrics. You know, my denim jeans are kind of quite resistant, and that's like having a more tannic texture. Whereas, you know, this is a nice cashmere jumper. It's kind of like smooth and soft, and some wines have that sort of soft silkiness to them. So texture's a big part of what we're interested in. And then once you go from there, you can start dialing up different characters in different varieties. And we make everything from Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, Sangiovese, Fiano, Saperavi, Shiraz, of course, Cabernet Sauvignon, Mourvedre, a lot of different great varieties, and to then do it on different sites makes for a lot of interesting wines. So we have some really old vines, and South Australia, if you don't know it, is actually home to some of the oldest vines in the world, thanks to the fact that we're an island continent and we haven't had a lot of phylloxera over here. Probably our oldest vines are planted in 08, so getting some serious years, 117 years on those vines now, and I love them. I love them because also they're just so robust and resilient. You know, I love it when things outlast us. It's humbling, you know, it's humbling to see plants and trees that outlast humans. So I tip my hat to those vines, and it's interesting to see the flavours and the nuance that they give you. But I'm equally passionate about pulling something out and starting again, because a lot of what makes winemaking interesting and what makes McLaren Vale such a fresh and vibrant region is that we're prepared to try new stuff. So if you didn't embrace new, we would have never have grown something like Saperavi or put in Fiano or Sangiovese. So I love old vines, but I also love new stuff. These guys here are old but new. So they are from my family's original Grenache vineyard from back up in Adelaide. So they're from the original Grenache that my great-great-great-grandfather brought out. He was the person that planted the first vines in South Australia, and one of his founding varietals was Grenache. Along with his Shiraz and Pedro Jimenez, that was what South Australia started with. We took cuttings from those original vines and replanted them here as bush vines in McLaren Vale. So it's the same DNA as the original ones from 187 years ago, but rebirthed 15 years ago. Sustainability for us is personal, and I guess that's because we are a small generational family business. It makes you a good farmer, and you have an interest in looking after the land and the environment because you can see the past that you've come from. In my case, 6 generations. Well, I've got children and I hope that they'll be involved. And so I kind of go, well, what's going to happen for the next 6 generations? And if we blast out the environment, what's going to be left? And it just is so logical that if you plaster stuff with chemicals in an environment where there's, you know, water that is scarce, it's a zero-sum game. So you want to be nurturing and putting back. So we subscribe to generational farming, regenerative farming, zero pesticides. And I'm really proud that McLaren Vale is actually, they're the vanguards of this program, thanks to some, you know, really wonderful people down here who kick-started it and have a great passion for it. We are probably the greenest wine region in Australia, and that's something to be really proud of. Here in McLaren Vale, we are flanked by the Gulf of St Vincent just out here, and you know, I think of that as being like nature's air conditioning unit that just brings in this lovely blast of cool air, particularly welcomed in a warm summer when the fruit is on the vine, getting ripe, because it just allows some cool conditions to slow down the ripening of the Shiraz and for the flavours to be able to develop, which results in wines that have beautiful complexity, velvety tannins. They can be powerful without being a sledgehammer. And they're the sort of wines that, you know, makes you want to kind of finish your second glass before you've finished your first. They're beautiful wines, and it's very much, in many ways, thanks to the coastal influence of this region. We were inspired to craft 3 different Shiraz from our 3 distinct vineyards because back in 2009 we made one from this vineyard here where the cellar is, and it's a Bay of Biscay clay here, and it produced a wine that was really strong and very powerful. And you know, this is the soil here that it comes from, this rich clay. Now if I wet that, that's going to become like plasticine, and you've got to be a mighty vine to survive in this. And so that's why I call the wine that comes off this vineyard the Boxer, because it produces really strong linear style tannin that are really direct on your palate. The texture is quite robust and the flavours are savoury. So when I say that, they sort of think about things like Kalamata olives, or that 90% chocolate, or coffee grounds, anise, licorice sort of flavours. And that fascinated me, that it was different to what I was seeing in some of our blended wines. So the next year, we decided to do the same thing with a single vineyard Shiraz from our church vineyard, just 600 metres down the road. And you can see that that's got a different soil again. This is an ancient creek bed. It's alluvial soil, looks quite different, and it is. It's got red ironstones that run through it. And what we found there, that it was a completely different Shiraz, and yet it's only 600 metres away. How could that be? And what it is it's the power of terroir, because that soil produces, I call this Shiraz the burlesque dancer, because she's curvaceous and she's red fruited, whereas, the Boxer is black, and she's really generous and plush and quite pillowy in the mouth, and it sort of reminds me of red velvet and cranberries and, baking spices. And so then that was a revelation to us, that was so different. So on our third vineyard, which is over at Blewett Springs in sandier soil, we thought, well, let's do it again. And you just have to look at this to see that this is totally different in character. This is basically beach sand. And the Shiraz that comes out of here, we call the ballerina, because she's every bit the athlete of the other two. She can keep up, but much finer on her feet, really quite fleet and pretty in a perfumed and fragrant sense. So lavender, violet, coriander seeds, just a totally different character. And then when I started putting the three of them together, it was remarkable. I just couldn't believe that every year you could have three Shiraz from the same house, basically picked around the same time, vinified in exactly the same way. They all go into second use French oak barriques, so there's no oak impact that's influencing anything. They all come out on the same day, bottled at the same time, line them up together, couldn't be more different. That's the power of terroir.